As the cliche goes, April showers bring May flowers. But usually what comes after is the heat and dryness of summer. Hello again, Essay here. And before the hot weather of the holiday shows up, you should indulge in my new short story, The White Cat, a free exclusive on Substack. The links are down below in description. Join Margot Thompson, a beautiful stage actress and recent widow who finds salvation in the form of a white cat during a night of terror. While checking out my oddball thriller, remember that my Glitch series is still available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The links are down below in the description. While you'll find my peculiar story about a white pussy entertaining, that doesn't mean I'm out of ideas. I still have more stories coming down the pike, so as long as I don't run into any mishaps, you'll see those stories as well. Now let's get back to the video. Hello again. Essay here. What is the power of propaganda? Depends who you ask. Because originally, the idea of propaganda, modern propaganda, only came about in the 1920s, about 100 years ago. In fact, there was a book called Propaganda that was published during that time. But in the modern era, propaganda can mean a lot of things. It could mean misinformation or disinformation. And under the right circumstances, it can work or it could fail. Indeed, anyone who remembers the lead up to the invasion of Iraq by George W. knows that there was a lot of propaganda about Saddam Hussein, about Al-Qaeda, claiming that Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda were working together, how they planned 9/11, how Saddam Hussein had nukes and he was going to nuke the West if we didn't stop him. And therefore everyone went along with the propaganda, and of course we found out after the invasion that it was all rubbish, BS. And then, like an old Who song, we promise ourselves we won't get fooled again. Well, guess what? We didn't keep our word. Because recently, there was a vote in Congress. It happened just this weekend, on the 21st of April, 2024. And the vote basically was about Ukraine. And some of you right now are saying, oh, please, not again. Yeah, I know. But this is important. Now, Mike Johnson, currently the Speaker of the House of Representatives, he just a few short months ago, when he became Speaker, said that he was not going to have a vote in Congress unless we had some money for the southern border. Well, apparently something happened between then and now. And this vote that took place, it provided money for Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel, but no money for the southern border. Why? I don't rightly know. But I do know that there is footage, primarily from C-SPAN, showing the reasons why a lot of people voted for this bill. And to be quite blunt about it, it's a lot of malarkey. to use an old Joe Biden term. A lot of BS. People saying, oh, we have to spend all this money on Ukraine, otherwise the Russians are going to invade, and stuff like that. Now, I'm going to show you part of a video that Mark Dice did, where he basically complains loudly about this vote and how it appears that a big chunk of the people in Congress are basically been, to use a Ilhan Omar term, been hypnotized by BS propaganda. Are you ready? Okay, here it is.
Over the weekend, Congress met on Saturday for a very special session. So you know that what they were voting on must have been critically important for the country, because nobody wants to work on a Saturday, especially government employees who have the most paid vacation days and paid time off of anybody in the country. Were they voting to finally secure the border and deport the 30 plus million illegal aliens who have invaded our country? No. Were they voting to build more prisons and hire more police officers to stop the crime wave that's sweeping across the country? Of course not. Were they trying to stop the rampant inflation before the dollar hyperinflates into worthlessness? No. They were voting to give away another $95 billion of our tax money to foreign countries, to Ukraine and Israel, and now even Taiwan. This was the moment the bill passed, with 100 Republicans voting yay, 112 voting nay. So about half of our Republicans are America last. And just take a listen and take a look at the celebration once it became apparent that the, well, treason had occurred. They're chanting Ukraine, Ukraine. And yes, they are waving Ukrainian flags on the floor of the House of Representatives. Here's a closer look. While the majority of members of Congress are complete clowns, the award for the most idiotic argument in favor of the bill goes to Representative Gerald Connolly, a Democrat, of course, from Virginia.
Some say, well, we have to deal with our border first. The Ukrainian-Russian border is our border. It's the border between depraved autocracy and freedom-loving people seeking our democratic way of life. Do we have a stake in that outcome?
No, we don't, sir. Just like none of the regional or ethnic conflicts that have been going on in Africa since the beginning of time aren't any of our business either. After the latest round of foreign welfare passed, a Democrat congressional candidate from New York named Nate McMurray posted Slava Ukraine, which means glory to Ukraine, adding die, MAGA, die, you lose. Well, I mean, you are right, we did lose, and while this won't be the straw that breaks America's back, it sure is adding to the pile that's going to cause the inevitable. I mean, hey, we're only $34 trillion in debt, which, when you break it down to per citizen, that's $103,000 per person. That's man, woman, and child. Now, if you break that down into taxpayer, which means anybody about 16, 17 or up, then we all owe over $250,000 in national debt, $266,000, which, well, until the inflation crisis hit over the last few years, used to be a mortgage on a pretty nice house in most parts of the country. And in a few more years, that will double, and every single one of us will owe the equivalent of over $500,000 to the national debt. And because Marjorie Taylor Greene has been a leading critic of Speaker of the House Mike Johnson bending over for the Democrats, she is now being called Moscow Marge, but not just by the liberal media industrial complex, by the neocon industrial complex as well. This from the New York Post, which is generally kind of conservative. Niet, Moscow Marge. I mean, what's next? Did Ben Shapiro do a special interview with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson just before the vote, hoping to convince more Republicans to support the foreign aid bill? Oh, wait, what's this?
So we've been discussing the chaos in the Republican House. We are joined on the line by Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Broad bipartisan support for these bills, 316 to 94, but there are people, as usual, screaming and crying about it. Speaker Johnson, thanks so much for joining the show. Great to talk to you.
Screaming and crying about not wanting to give another $100 billion of our tax dollars to a foreign country. The nerve of some Americans.
Ben, great to be with you. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks for all you do for your favorite foreign country, Ben. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for Israel.
Why are you advancing these bills to the floor?
Well, we're at a point of pivotal decision. I mean, this is a dangerous time on the world stage, as you and I know, and Israel is in great jeopardy fighting for their existence. Ukraine is close to being overrun, and they're estimated to be out of ammo by the end of this month.
We've been overrun. There are 30 million criminal invaders in our country right now, not to mention the tens of millions of anchor babies that they've had who are now American citizens who can't even speak our language here.
Of course, Iran and its aggression of Israel has continued, and we have to address these matters. We have to meet the moment. And so the House is fixing the Senate supplemental bill, the foreign aid bill.
That's enough. We get the point. You're giving more of our tax dollars away to foreign countries, while Ben Shapiro is the lead cheerleader in the conservative media, egging it on. The liberal media is almost as excited about this as little Ben Shapiro, with CNN declaring that Mike Johnson is the next Winston Churchill. By passing Ukraine aid, the accidental speaker became an unlikely Churchill. And let's not forget what the very first thing that Mike Johnson did once he became the new Speaker of the House. Was it to demand that the U.S. border be secured and we deport the 30 million illegal aliens? Was it to rein in the crime problem in American cities? No, of course not. It was this.
The first bill that I'm going to bring to this floor in just a little while will be in support of our dear friend Israel, and we're overdue in getting that done.
But for years, Ben Shapiro has been saying that they don't need our help.
They say that I want America to fight wars for Israel. Nope. First of all, Israel can take care of herself.
A few moments later.
If Israel is forced to the wall, the possibility of nuclear exchange is extremely high. That is why it is very important that the United States provide the material aid to Israel.
But I thought that they could take care of themselves. This would be like somebody moving out of their parents' house and then claiming that they're fully independent and they don't need anybody's help and they can make it on their own in the world while their parents are still paying for their rent. Here's General Mark Milley over a year ago. This was February of 2023, so 14 months ago, making equally ridiculous statements.
Russia has lost. They've lost strategically, operationally, and tactically. And they are paying an enormous price on the battlefield.
Well, if they lost the war and Ukraine won, then why are we giving them any more money?
Okay, you saw that, right? Now, of course, those of you out there whose brains still work knows that these excuses people were making was just outlandish, complete nonsense. I agree. And of course, that little icing on the cake, after they did their vote, a bunch of people brought out little Ukrainian flags and was shouting Slava Ukraini. Really, dude? It's stupid. Because a few smart people, such as Brian Beletic, over at the New Atlas, he said that most of that money for Ukraine, at least, is not very little is going to end up in Zelensky's bank account. Most of that money is going to go to Lockheed, to Raytheon, and various other defense contractors. And no, they're not going to be making bullets for Zelensky. They're going to make bullets for the U.S. military to replace the bullets that we gave Zelensky. You see? Now, of course, some of you are probably saying, but don't the federal government has a regular budget for that? Yeah, they do. But anyone who remembers Vietnam probably remembers that LBJ was spending a lot of money outside the regular defense budget. And it wasn't until until after Vietnam was over that people realized how much money was truly spent that was off the books, as the cliche goes. But in the case of what's going on right now, yeah, it's technically on the books, but the way some people were pushing this damn spending bill, they're making you think that the money was going straight to Zelensky when in fact it's not true. In fact, I remember reading not too long ago that the exact numbers are that $7 billion is actually going to go to Zelensky, and the remaining and the remainder of that $61 billion, I think it's going to be what, about $54 billion is going to go to the military-industrial complex. So there you go. So then you say, well, that sounds like throwing good money after bad. You're right, it is. It's a waste of money. Because anyone who knows military history knows that the people in Kiev are not going to pull this airplane out of its nosedive. It's going to hit the ground. And when it does, it's going to be bad. Indeed, it's probably going to be a bigger debacle than Afghanistan was. Indeed, bigger than Vietnam was. Because anyone who remembers those debacles knew that they were, for the most part, self-contained. In South Asia and in Southeast Asia. But this Ukraine mess, oh no. Because when the Project Ukraine, as the brothers at the Duran like to call it, finally goes kaput, there's going to be a lot of recriminations. And not just here in the United States, but also in Europe. And, wait for it, anyone who remembers what happened aftermath of the fall of Saigon remembers that there was a lot of people who fled Vietnam. Remember the boat people? I remember the boat people. Except it's not going to be people in boats fleeing the communist tyranny. You're going to have a bunch of people fleeing Ukraine into Europe. And you think the Polacks are going to be able to stop them? I'm not betting any money on that. And the citizens of Europe, most of them who really don't know what's happening, I mean, thanks to propaganda, they've been told for 2 solid years that Ukraine's been winning. And then, to paraphrase what Hemingway once said, when he was asked, how did you go broke? And he said, first gradually, then suddenly. Well, you could say the same thing about Ukraine. People be asking the question, how did Ukraine lose? Gradually, then suddenly. And of course, this has happened before. People who read the history of the First World War saw the same thing happen to the Central Powers. Germany, Austria, and of course Turkey. Because if you go back and look what was going on there, the damn Allied powers and the Central Powers were basically nose to nose fighting each other to a standstill for 4 solid years. And then around 1917, 1918, the Central Powers basically fell apart. One by one, they basically were surrendering. First Bulgaria, then Austro-Hungary, and then the Ottoman Turkish Empire, and then finally Germany. Because they basically couldn't keep it up any longer. They ran out of money, they ran out of ammunition, they ran out of soldiers. And now you jump forward to the present day, same thing's happening in Ukraine. I mean, yeah, the Americans did just recently pass this damn spending bill, but it's not enough. It's basically a stopgap measure. And indeed, multiple people said already, like the brothers at Duran.com said that this whole damn spending bill is basically to prevent Ukraine from collapsing before the 2024 election. And then you say, why? Because these neocons, and let's not pretend, most of the people who voted for this bill are neocons. Indeed, that was one telling thing about this vote in the House of Representatives, was that to a man and woman, everyone on the Democrat side voted for it. But on the Republican side, it was like an even split. 110, 100, 100 voted for the bill. 110 said, no way, Jose. And at that point, you say, so what's going on with those 100 Republicans? Why did they vote for it? Now you could say, yeah, they were basically fooled by propaganda, telling them that Ukraine is winning, just need a little bit more, they could win this. And others are just basically bought and paid for by the deep state and the damn military-industrial complex. That's a fair assessment. But regardless, it's basically a waste of time, a waste of resources. Because like I said, most of that money is not going to end up in Ukraine's coffers. And Ukraine doesn't have the soldiers to fight Russia. Now, of course, some of you right now are sitting there typing, oh, but Ukraine is winning. The Ukrainians only lost 30,000 soldiers. Russians lost like 3 million soldiers, and et cetera, et cetera. I said, oh, please, just be quiet. I mean, anyone who's been sitting there watching Western media for 2 solid years would think that the damn Ukrainians are practically marching on Moscow. So it's not true. If anything, Moscow is about to march on damn Kiev. Or at very least Kharkiv, which is Ukraine's second largest city. And the Biden administration, they're so damn cynical, all they're worried about is saving their own skin. I mean, think about it. If the Biden administration truly wanted Ukraine to win, you figure they would provide them whatever they needed to win. But if you were paying attention to this mess in Ukraine, you would see that they were basically giving them hand-me-downs, second-hand equipment, or equipment that was basically stripped down, like those Abrams tanks that were missing all the bells and whistles on them. Yeah, stuff like that. And offering them F-16s, you know, F-16 are technically an obsolete airplane, since most of the Europeans are swapping out their F-16s for F-35s. I mean, if you thought, and I'm seriously, if the Biden administration and, wait for it, the Atlantic Council wanted the Ukrainians to win, you figured they'd be giving them F-30, getting the people in Kiev F-35s, you would think. And the fact they were just giving them second and third hand weapons, it was almost as if they had no intention, they didn't really want them to win. So then you say, what was it all for? And of course, people like Colonel Douglas McGregor, he said more than once that it was all about basically regime change in Russia. The presumption was that Russia was weak, it was feeble, it was a backward country. Remember John McCain talking about the gas station nuclear weapons crack? And these people found out the hard way, no, not true. And the worst thing about it is this has happened before. Indeed, before Operation Barbarossa, old Mr. Brush Mustache himself, you know, Herr Hitler, he famously said that the Soviet Union under Stalin was basically a hollowed out facade. And that when the Wehrmacht, you know, the German army kicks in the door, the whole damn rotten construct would just fall in on itself. Except it didn't. I mean, anyone who remembers those history books knows that, yeah, initially the Wehrmacht was having success against the Soviet Union, but then their offensive stalled, the Soviet Union counterattacked, and eventually just chased the Germans all the way back to Berlin and then blew up Berlin. And now it looks like it's happening again. And yet you have these Western leaders, totally deluded, sitting there saying, telling themselves, or should say, having been convinced by bad propaganda, by the news media and by the military-industrial complex that, oh, we just need to give them more money and they could win, or they can hold back the Russian bear. And it's not going to happen. And, of course, according to, like I said, what Douglas McGregor said, and it was seconded by that guy, Mersheimer, you know, that college professor out of University of Illinois. The plan was that they were hoping that this whole damn mess would basically weaken Russia to a point where the government would collapse and they would get someone to replace Putin. And I'm thinking, yeah, if Russia was still in the same condition it was, say, at the end of the Soviet era or during the Yeltsin era, when it was weak and enfeebled and generally dysfunctional. But modern Russia isn't the old Soviet Union of the end of the 1980s or Russia of the 1990s. The situation there is completely different. And indeed, even a few European leaders are now seeing the writing on the wall. I mean, Olaf Scholz, you know, the guy who runs Germany, he had a meeting not too long ago with the Xi Jinping. And he basically asked Xi Jinping to basically talk to Putin and ask him to quit. And of course, Xi Jinping, who is nobody's messenger boy, basically told Olaf Scholz to go fuck himself. He told him, if you want to tell Putin to quit the fighting in Ukraine, talk to him yourself. Of course, Olaf Scholz can't do that because Olaf Scholz is a coward little weasel. And indeed, Macron over there in Paris, same thing. Indeed, a few weeks ago, he thought he could talk to, of all people, Shoigu, you know, defense minister in Russia, wanting to have some kind of, I think the word they used was pause, but I think the real term they really used was ceasefire during the Paris Olympics. And of course, Shoigu basically told Macron, or I should say Macron's messenger boy, which was the French foreign minister, to go fuck himself. Especially since when you consider the fact that the Russians are not even allowed to participate in the upcoming Paris Olympics. So why should they have a ceasefire for the Paris Olympics? They're not even allowed to attend. So yeah, there are a few people in the Atlantic Council who realize that this whole damn Project Ukraine is a failure. But the thing is, their own citizens probably don't know it yet. And indeed, despite the propaganda, there's a very good chance that Project Ukraine will end before the end of this year. And at that point, the people of the collective West, especially those who have been spoon-fed all the propaganda, about Ukraine is winning are going to sit there and scratch their heads, and they're going to say, what the hell just happened? Well, I'm going to tell you now what happened. Your leaders have been lying to you, lying through their teeth. And I think that at that point, you're probably going to start seeing a lot of these Western leaders being replaced. Not right away, of course, but believe me, they're going to have elections in a lot of these European countries. Germany, France, England, Spain, Italy. And these people are going to be replaced because their citizens are going to realize, wait a second, our countries are poor. We have a whole bunch of these refugees coming into our territory. You spent way too much money on this boondoggle called Ukraine. It turned to a complete failure. Our relationship with Russia is now worse off than it's ever been. And it's all your fault. Therefore, a lot of these people in Europe whose brains still work, they're going to sit there and say, why should we keep you as our leaders? And then you're going to see all these people being kicked out. Every last one of them. And God willing, if we don't have another screwed up election, we're going to get rid of the clown that's in behind Resolute's desk in the White House. But then what comes in the aftermath? I don't rightly know. Because no man knows the future. But you can look at trends. And the trends are going to be that our relationship with the Ruskies and, wait for it, the Chinese too, is going to be screwed up for at least a generation, maybe two. And that's not surprising. That's not surprising at all. It's a damn shame because it didn't have to happen. If people had good information and good leaders, none of this mess would have happened. Well, that's all I'm going to say about this damn miserableness, ridiculous vote in Congress, and all this wasted money and wasted resources. That's my opinion.